Okay, hello everybody. Today is November 29th. It's just after Thanksgiving, and this is episode 19 of At Percussion. With me is Laurel Black,
Hi.
Megan Arns,
Hello.
and Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
So joining us today is the Associate Professor of Percussion Studies at Florida State University. He's a worldwide performer, clinician, and recording artist. He's founder, recording engineer, and producer at Garnet House Productions. And I think his biggest credit has got to be that his student is our very own Megan Arns.
That is one of the best parts, for sure.
So that's super cool. You guys please welcome Dr. John Parks. How are you?
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Cool. Well, thanks so much. Hey, Ben, you just showed us something cool you received in the mail from Dr. Parks.
I went to check my university mailbox, and I had an envelope I was not expecting in it, a thick, padded envelope. And I opened it up, and I found a CD inside that said, "Enjoy FSU Percussion." And it was, let's see if I can get this without a glare on it, Florida State University Percussion Ensemble Volume 3, 10 Windows. It's their new album. It has 8 tracks on it, including one of my favorites is Ionization, but there's also some great works by Adam Silverman, Ivan Trevino, Brian Nosny, and a few others on here. So definitely a very cool album.
You know, we have a lot of Facebook questions, and a lot of them pertain to recording, so maybe we can knock some of them out with maybe just telling us a little bit about Garnet House and some of the awesome CDs you've produced and kind of your whole thing with recording and producing.
Well, sure. Actually, it's great that Megan is here because she was here when I first started into all of this stuff. When we won PASIC for the first time in 2007, I was looking for something to do with the studio that would be different from everyone else in the country. I sit around and think a lot about these kinds of things. And it turns out that the only program in the country that had a recording counterpart in the curriculum was Dan Moore's at Iowa. If you guys know Dan well, you know that he's really into all of this stuff as well. But he doesn't have his setup in a position where the students can use it every day. So we kind of evolved through several different iterations of what we have when it started with having some holes drilled and, you know, snakes run back and forth between rooms, because my office is actually right beside our percussion studio where we do all the lessons and recording. And we had kind of a cheap interface and a couple of mics, and to make up for the fact that I didn't know anything, well, I should back up. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and so I didn't sleep for about 6 months probably. I had insomnia that was so bad, and I would just stay up at night and join recording forums and read what they were using and how they did stuff. And some of them were worked for Sony and Telarc and Naxos, etc. And I just started throwing things out there and saying, "Listen to this. What do you hear? What do you like?" And they started telling me what they heard and what I should probably do next. And so I went upstairs and got more stuff. And of course, we were using this for lesson recording. Every student would come in and we would record it in high definition, and then I would take it an MP3 of their lesson and give it on a flash drive, and then they would be able to have it. And then the next iteration of that was to Dropbox. But now we just have people bring in their laptops, and we have several interfaces in the studio, and the students can just hook right up to the mics that are already set up. So it kind of cuts out the middleman. I don't have to put everything on flash drives or put it in Dropbox, which of course takes time. So now
they
really
all
the
have
students
the
just
software
plug right in.
on their laptop?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they all have the drivers for the differences, and software, as you know, you can go super cheap like Audacity, which is free, or you can go super hardcore like Pro Tools. So the students all have different levels of involvement. Some of them are using Audition. A lot of them use Logic if they're Mac people. So they can use whatever DAW that they like, and then now they can just record everything straight to their computers instead of having to go through me first. Plus, we record all our percussion ensemble rehearsals. At the end of rehearsal, we'll just run the piece, usually twice, take those 2 runs, put those in Dropbox so the students can go and listen to them, so we don't have to spend that time posting it on the web. So that's where it really started, was just, I think all of us can relate to wanting to have students sound better every single time that you see them, right? And recording just gives you the tools to do it without having to, well, it's like I don't have to repeat myself. I don't have to say anything that I said last week, I don't have to have them stop to write anything down. Everything is going straight into this recording. So it saves a lot of time in the lesson because you don't have to say the same things over and over again. And I think it's been really beneficial to them because then they go and become their own teacher when they start to hear the things like, wow, am I really dragging there? Am I really that out of tune? Am I really, that in front or that behind? Or is my time really as bad as Dr. Park says it is? All these kinds of things. They hear that themselves. Or if we're playing cymbal crashes and they don't understand why theirs aren't opening up like mine are, you can actually look at the waveforms and see some of those things. So it's kind of like a laboratory for everything that we're trying to teach in the first place. It's just it makes it a little more three-dimensional because we have all of these other things that we're involving. Only listening or only watching versus trying to concentrate on all those things when you're playing.
I think it's
that was kind of
that you...
a long answer, wasn't it?
No, that's perfect. That's what we wanted. That's great. I think it's wonderful you get them some hands-on experience because I'm amazed how many people I run into that they just don't know how to do this. They don't know how to level a mic. They don't even know how to set up a home stereo. And their answer is always, well, I never had a class on that. And it's like, neither did I. You don't need a class on that. You just need to get your hands on it. The best way to learn is just to have it around, just be around it,
Oh, yeah. Well, it's cool, too, because I actually teach a class now in the spring. It's a seminar just for percussionists, and we start with very, very basic operations all the way through pretty extreme multi-tracking, blue screening for video, chroma keying, etc. So it gets pretty crazy. But the reason that we've moved, I guess we've gotten so much into the video component as well is because of pre-screenings. Everyone in the country requires that except for us, I might say. Do you, Casey, require pre-screenings?
We do for assistantships, and
Gotcha.
and we do for international students, just as a courtesy and a safety.
No, you're smart. I refuse to do it under any situation. We can talk about that later if you want to, but I have a very staunch, old-school way of looking at that. So, at any rate, for pre-screenings, in order to get the students at the level that they need to be, we needed the absolute highest level video, the highest level audio, and to be able to put those two things together is a really big deal. Not only for that, but also for scholarship auditions and also for pre-screenings for orchestras.
Well, there is a Facebook question with the word pre-screening in it. So let's just go to that. Ted Jackson says, "What were your initial intentions when you first began to pursue your interest in recording, and how have your intentions changed?" And then he says in parentheses, "Student advancements, pre-screenings, etc."
Mm-hmm. Well, I think making sure that the students looked and sounded the best that they possibly could was at the heart of all of this. And Megan, you remember this is at the very, very beginning then when we were still using like Super 8 video. We weren't even using digital. The thing for me with pre-screening, and as you guys probably all remember, it all started really with Mike and with Indiana, Mike Britt and at Indiana. And the idea was that let's say you've got a family from China and the little girl or boy is going to fly all the way to the United States with their whole family when they have no shot of getting in. They just don't play at the right level. And I think that the idea of the pre-screening was to save them that trouble, which I totally understand. Juilliard, Manhattan, Eastman, Northwestern, these places, any of you guys too, I think that it's totally appropriate depending upon what you feel the role of that pre-screening is supposed to be. For me, I figure I could be out shoveling crap, or I could sit there and listen to 20 minutes of a student who has worked their butt off to get their audition ready for me to listen to and has invested enough time to come all the way down, meet the students, hang out, go through the audition process, etc. I think that it does a couple of things for me not to pre-screen. One is that, sure, students may come in at the master's level and they're not ready, but we make sure that their audition experience is so positive that when they come back around for doctoral auditions, we're first on their list. Yeah. And, man, I can point to a lot of people that now have jobs out there that you guys know that didn't get in for their master's and went somewhere else, got their stuff together, came in as doctoral students and just ripped it. And I wouldn't have had that chance to have them if I had pre-screened them and told them they weren't even good enough to show up and try. And where I listen to students and I'm thinking, God knows, this is just horrendous. You know, when your student comes in that's wearing like a Hawaiian shirt and has no sticks and is wearing sandals and comes in and calls me John. Hey, John.
Hey, man, can
and
I
I
borrow
said,
some sticks, dude?
well, you know, I was just going to come in and kind of jam and see how it goes. You know, that kind of thing. Yes, I could get rid of it, but really, there's so few of those that it's really not that big a deal to sit through. I mean, I can still even make sure that that person has a good experience, even though there's no way they're getting in. So I just think it's, I hate it.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many,
Also,
like,
the other
what
thing
are the numbers manageable?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I
Auditions
think
every year?
the year after we played PASIC the second time, I think we had probably 60 graduate auditions. And
Wow.
I don't think that there were really any of them that I thought that were awful. But now, you know, whenever we play PASIC, there's usually a big like show of interest the year after that or the year after that. But now that it's down to like 4 or 5 years away, I mean, we'll probably hear 35 grad students, something like that.
Wow.
And most of them are really good. I mean, most of them really are very good. And I probably wouldn't have gotten rid of them in a pre-screening situation. But the other thing is that some students, they may not be ready by December 1st, but by February,
Yeah.
they're jamming. And you're missing out on those people. And also, I mean, think about it. If you got turned down and you're like, oh, my God, you know, I've been so busy this fall and I just couldn't get my stuff ready by December, and then you get turned down, I mean, your chances of looking at that school later on go down pretty significantly.
Yeah.
So I just don't do it. Sorry.
That's a really cool point of view, and I think you're right. This is my first semester ever being on this end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've looked at tapes, judging, and things before, but I think it's a really good point, and it's certainly not the quantity I'm concerned with. I wouldn't mind sitting through the a longer day. That's no problem. But I do know what you're saying about the guy in the Hawaiian shirt without sticks, and I'm yet to see that here. But you know,
You're not in Florida.
I'm sure, Ben, you've seen some. I mean, it's not everybody is totally, on the level, and that's okay. I mean, I figure anybody can have a good experience, even if they're completely horrible. I can still make sure that their time here is positive, and maybe they go somewhere where they get their stuff together as an undergrad and they come back as a master's student. I'm like, oh, that tells me something about that student that I wouldn't know from not listening to them in the first place.
So I suppose in a way you're using it as a chance to A, educate them, and B, recruit for the future.
Sure. And granted, sometimes the education part of the audition doesn't go over so well. I had a student that came in, you'll love this. He comes in, he plays Porgy, and he mislearned all of the turnarounds. So he was playing the wrong set class for each one of the turnarounds, and so he plays it, and I look down and I was like, okay, can you try that again? Thinking maybe he just messed up. Does it the exact same way? And I was like, okay, how many auditions do you have left? He's like, well, I have 4 more. And I said, well, don't freak out. I just want to show you something that I think that you might have mislearned. And he looks at me and he says, I didn't mislearn anything. It's like, yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Allow me. I went up there, grabbed the mallets, played it down, and he looks at me and he goes, well, someone whose name I won't mention just listened to this, and he said that it was flawless. And I was like, well, he might be
Ben
deaf.
Ben Charles.
Yeah. He might be Ben Charles. No. But,
The Ben Charles.
sometimes, I had one time a kid that came in and started Sorcerer's Apprentice on a G flat instead of a G natural, and I let him do it 3 times, and then finally I said, it's a G, and he was like, no, it's not. Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Hey,
did you listen to it ever? Yeah.
Speaking of Ben Charles, I'd just like to interrupt for 1 second and ask John a quick question. If you saw this on a test, you had to write this title. Mm-hmm. Which one do you use, the top or the bottom? I just want to ask. I'm sorry, one more time?
Use the top.
No,
okay.
No, wrong.
No, that's it. That's good. We're done. Thank you, Dr. Parks.
No,
thank you very much.
That is so wrong.
Thank you, Dr. Parks. I
quit
appreciate
the
it.
podcast right now.
And moving on. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this later, buddy.
Mike Truesdell said I was right. Mike Truesdell said I was right.
Oh, that's telling. Mike
Truesdell
Truesdell knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Is Mike Truesdell Dr. Parks? Okay, so I haven't.
Dr. Truesdell.
I know, but that's not Dr. Parks. Anyway, I'm just gonna
Eastman versus Juilliard duking it out here.
Just for the record, real quick, Ben, Dr. Parks did select the top one, and moving on. So Alan Lang says, for a musician just starting out in the recording process, what are some helpful tips you would recommend to go about the whole ordeal?
Oh, that's good. Well, the first thing you have to do is figure out whether or not you're going to go the Zoom way or the pair of stereo microphone or a stereo pair of microphones and an interface in your computer way. And for most people, I think the best idea is to have both if you have the capital. To get one of the really nice Zoom recorders, that's kind of nice for being in the practice room and recording your lesson close up, etc. It can be really useful for that. But having a stereo pair of microphones and an interface gives you more of a high definition commercial recording resolution to whatever it is that you're trying to put together, which totally changes the image, which changes the depth, which changes, there are just a lot of perception things that I think you get out of a stereo pair that are spread out, by the 3-to-1 rule versus what a Zoom recorder is. So in short, I would say to the student, if you buy something like, I think it's the H6 is the newest and the most advanced of the handhelds that they have. And actually, if you want to go a step further, to go with the Q8, which is a really nice piece of equipment. It has video and audio already synced up together. Those are quite nice. And I think, Megan, correct me, I think you can actually take the microphone array off and put another one on there, so you have like XY, AB, stereo, ORTF, or other things available. And they also have additional XLR inputs into the back, so if you have a stereo pair of microphones that you really like, you can run those into the Zoom. That's a really great one-stop solution for whatever you would want to record, whether it's your lesson or a rehearsal or your own practicing, etc. Slightly more complicated going over the way that I did, which is, buying an interface, buying a set of microphones, and then being able to record onto the computer via some software. So I'd say either of those two are equally valid and work well, but I think what you find is that you have more flexibility when you talk about imaging and resolution with a stereo pair than you do with the Zoom.
And I would just recommend to Alan that if there were any of those words you didn't understand, like resolution, stereo pair, Zoom, 3-to-1 ratio, XY configuration, anything he said, just seriously look up each and every single term. One by one until you learn more. I'm not a talented recording person myself, but I'm so much better than I used to be, and it's just been a little step-by-step process. And
it's funny. There was a recording article in Percussive Notes like 2 years ago. I don't know if you guys remember this, 2 or 3 years ago, where the guy who was doing it talked about putting one microphone on top of the snare drum and one microphone 10 feet back up in the air as an acceptable way of recording. And I was like, what? What? How can you do that?
Is
you
that
can't
the idea?
Do that?
Is that the idea that you have one on the drum and then you have a room mic?
Well, the thing is that both of those are in mono, because if you have them straight in a line, then when you listen back to them, they're going to be straight down the middle in mono, right? You're not going to have any distance on the left or on the right. But if you take the two microphones and you put them, say, 10 feet back, and you put them up like this, I know you can kind of see me pointing, based on the 3-to-1 rule again, which is something that if you want to look all that stuff up, Sweetwater has a great glossary that you can use, sweetwater.com. Not the beer, the music company. You put that up.
But also
it's out of Atlanta, which is terrific. 420. They have anyway, so you have the mics up like this, and then what you end up doing in post is that you pan them hard right and hard left, and that's what opens up your image to more of a binaural environment where it's like your head is 10 feet from the instrument and you're hearing it just as you would hear it if you were standing there. And that's the difference between what he was trying to get you to do and what I would have you do. Now, granted, I'm doing this project with Will James from the St. Louis Symphony, which I have to tell you about. He is recording all of the orchestral percussion repertoire with video and audio, all of it. And we just finished the first segment. We just did all of the snare drum excerpts about, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago in St. Louis at Powell Hall. And what we did was we ended up using 2 DPA 4006 transformerless Omnis, and then we put a third microphone underneath each snare drum. So we had right and left, and then we had in the center with this microphone underneath the snare. So it really picked up on everything that was happening with the snare assembly. And man, it just sounds unbelievable. And Paul Henrich is the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra recording engineer. And we were figuring all this stuff out, and what we ended up with was something that just absolutely sounds amazing. So when all this stuff finally hits, I think you'll really dig it. It's going to be pretty amazing. I'm going back to do xylophone with them in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
So
how does
yeah,
that work working with the other sound engineer? Do you do that a lot, collaborating?
It's my first time producing.
Okay.
But Paul is one of the finest recording engineers out there. I mean, he was part of the Grammy recording that St. Louis put out last year. I don't know if you guys listened to the John Adams City Noir recording with Jake Nisley's playing drum set and Will's playing vibraphone. Paul recorded all of that.
Okay.
So, I mean, he's a Grammy-winning producer. He's super cool. And basically, he just let me run the session and decide how many takes we took on all the different things. And he took care of all of the stuff that the engineer takes care of. So he's actually wonderful to work with.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I just want to add, to Alan or anybody that's never recorded anything, as a person who is not at all technologically inclined, I really appreciated your answer, John, where you gave specific examples and these specific products in particular. I think a lot of students just need to know perhaps what to buy. And as you were talking, Casey looked up the Q8, and I think it was maybe $400 on Amazon, something like that, which sounds like a lot of money. And as a student, that's a lot of money. But the difference that you'll see in your playing is well worth $400.
Well, that's exactly the thing. I mean, if everybody's playing a Pearl Philharmonic, granted, some people here are playing something different. However, if it's all pretty much the same kind of sound, if everybody's driving a Ferrari and you drive a Pinto, well, you're never going to make it. The same person with the same talent, same playing ability, same everything, and one person turns in a really high-quality recording and the other one turns in something crappy that they did with their iPhone, it makes a big difference. And people can say, well, that's not fair. I don't have any money. And unfortunately, if you don't make the investments, and I can't imagine anything other than equipment that makes as big a difference in your sound and in your development than recording equipment. So, if you can't afford $400, then you should probably reevaluate your life. I mean, I would spend that before I would spend it on food or social engagements or movies, which is really saying something. Go out and spend the money that you need to spend. But something else about that, the Zoom is really great, and this can kind of be a plug for my Sabbatical project. But what I've been spending all my time doing, aside from jet skiing and audio engineering, is that I'm putting together a 15-episode webinar series on basics of audio recording for professors and conductors. And so the first episode is going to hit around February, and it's going to start from here's how you take the SD card out of your Zoom recorder, put it into the computer, and open it in Audacity, all the way up to here's how we recorded our latest CD, or here's how we put together an effective pre-screening program, et cetera. So it's going to answer a lot of those questions, and I'm going to be able to show a lot of the pieces of equipment so that it actually, it means something when I say here's an interface, and most people don't know what that is. Here's this little box that has all these holes in it. So we'll be able to look at all of that stuff in depth with the webinar.
And where is that all going to be posted?
It's going to be free. It's going to be on a YouTube page that I still have to create. But that's going to be totally free. And speaking of, anybody that has audio questions about anything can always email me. And I'm not kidding, just this morning got a note back from a student. He's a master's student at New England Conservatory who, through Stephen Keener, Megan, you remember Stephen.
Of course.
Stephen told him, hey, if you want to get into recording, talk to Parks. And so I gave him a list of things for him to buy, and he went basically from not knowing anything about recording to making it through the pre-screenings for San Francisco and Nashville for the timpani positions.
Wow. That's
So,
great.
you know, he wrote this really, really nice note and said, you know, it's amazing that you would take care of me even though I'm not one of your students. But the thing is, we're all each other's students, and I'll help anybody with any of this stuff. In fact, I kind of enjoy it. I'm such a nerd. So if anybody has any questions, you know, you can just email me directly.
Well, and I'll just testify that it's always great advice, because John and I I guess we were driving back to or from the hotel at our gig, which I believe was in Georgia, right?
Yeah, in Atlanta.
Yeah, and we were talking about recording because I had just bought some microphones, and I'm still, you know, my nerd is getting higher and higher, and you were really great at immediately assessing the level I'm at. And you were able to talk to me, which I was really impressed with. Like, it didn't take much. I think like 1 minute of conversation, and I think you were able to figure out exactly what I don't know and talk to me.
Oh, I don't know about that.
At
I just
level
remember
throughout.
you had just bought a 414, as I remember, right?
Look at this memory. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I think you had just bought a 414. You're like, yeah, it's got this gold sputtered diaphragm, and I was like, it's either a C12 or a 414, and you're like, yeah.
It's rad.
Wow.
Dude, we love that
Those
mic.
are
My
great
knowledge
microphones.
stops at it's the gold one.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great. They're a little bright sometimes, but I really like them.
Oh, man. Hey, Megan, ask him that thing.
Yeah, so, you know, here at Percussion, we like to bring on people that we like to talk to, but we also consider our audience and who other people want to hear from. And so when we saw your Facebook post of the document that you shared, and the number of shares and the number of likes, we said, oh my gosh, we have to get him on, we have to talk to him. And you know, that document is very familiar to me, having studied with you, and has helped me a lot and helped me improve my own materials and with job applications and other applications. But it's called, for those of you who haven't seen this document, it's called the University Position from a Percussionist Point of View. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit, kind of just give us a little synopsis of the document and what you talk about it in it.
Sure. Well, it's funny that you mentioned this. Paul Beyer emailed me like 2 days ago and was like, we're going to publish this whole thing in Percussive Notes. And I said,
Really?
Great. Yeah, I said, that's great. You know, if you want to do it over multiple, I don't know exactly how he's going to do it. I'm sure we'll have to edit some of it down, but at any rate, he's going to put it out there, which I think is great.
That's awesome.
Basically, the whole thing came about, well, it's in two ways. One is that when I first got to FSU, they had this thing called the first-year assistant professor grant, which basically paid your salary for the summer, because I don't know whether all of you guys are like this, but FSU doesn't pay you in the summer, so your last paycheck is in April and your next one's in August. And what this allows you to do is after your first year, it's kind of a grant that almost everybody gets that kind of helps you make it through the summer. So I decided to use it to start typing a rant about everything that I thought that was wrong with the percussion world and how to fix it and how everything should work.
I think I still have a draft of that.
That's literally what it was. I think I called it like ranting something, and I just started typing, and it went and went and went and went and went. And as I started teaching this graduate seminar the spring of every year, that part of my ranting became part of the curriculum for that class. And you know, they have to read Inner Game, they have to read Zen and the Art of Archery, they have to read Mozart in the Jungle, they have to read Blink, they have to read, you know, all these articles, and then they have to read my ranting book. And what happened was the University of Rochester does this thing called the Future Faculty Initiative, where they invite doctoral students from all over the university, including Eastman, from the pharmacy, from the medical school, from journalism, etc. All of them get together for a whole day, and they bring back alums from all the different schools to talk about their experience with a particular part of the process. And so this is the second time that I've done it, and I decided to, instead of talking through all these points, I would just type them out. So I took the old ranting manuscript and cleaned it up a little bit and tried to get it more up to date with like how to do Skype interviews, for example, you know, strategies for that are in there, and just kind of cleaned it up. And I got Justin Alexander, who's like my favorite editor, to look through everything, and he fixed everything up, got it back, and then I sent it to the U of R for them to distribute it to all of the doctoral students at the university.
Wow.
And what happened as I was doing it, I thought, you know, I should just give this to everybody if they want it, because some of it some of it is, I don't know, maybe 80% is personal secrets that I've used to be really successful. I mean, I'm 3 for 4 on interviews and getting the job, and I figured, some of this stuff would be helpful for other people to have, especially because I don't need it to be a secret since I'm not applying for anything else. So then I just kind of threw it out there, and that's kind of where it is, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not the only way, of course.
It's really great, and yeah, I read it aloud on my phone while she was driving us home. We had a 6-hour drive from Thanksgiving, and yeah, Ben, you haven't said anything in a while. What did you think?
Yeah,
I like how you coordinated the sound projection thing in the back. What you got there? That baffle and your shirt are complimentary.
Wait, Casey, talk. I want to see what he's talking about.
Is he talking
I
about?
think he's talking to you, Ben.
Oh,
I'm talking to you,
oh,
Ben.
Yeah, no, I do that every week. We change out the colors.
That is really nice. You did it, Garnet, just for me.
Just for you.
Nice.
Yeah. No, I mean when I read it, it was when I first started reading it and realizing what I was reading, I was going, oh God, like here I am. I'm about to find out everything that I've ever done wrong. But then when I read it, it was actually comforting because 90 to 95% of what you were saying in there was what I had heard and what I had done. So I was like, okay, good. But I think one thing that when I first made my CV and when I've helped out friends with theirs, is you talked about like leading from the top left corner or something like that, and you gave 3 examples of how to list your education, and one had like the years first, and then it had all the other information behind that. And when you're just kind of glancing down the page, when you see years, it doesn't really mean anything. But if you see Eastman School of Music or something like that, you really kind of hone in on that, or Doctor of Musical Arts. That's the sort of thing you want to pop. So one thing I've found is like a lot of it really is just formatting and making the important things stand out versus you're not lying or making something up. Obviously, you just have to make sure that it's concise and easy to get through.
Well, Ben, you bring up a really good point, and that is you guys will all figure this out if you haven't already when you're on your first search committee. And what happens is you start getting angry with people who don't list things so that you can find them quickly. Like, if you think about your requirements for an assistant level job, for, let's say, a clarinet, and you're on the committee, and you start looking at these things, and you start having to go and hunt and peck and find within all of this elaborate wording and all this other kind of junk. If you can't find what you want to see or what you need, then typically that stuff's just going to get thrown in the no pile almost immediately.
In a sense, actually, a lot of it kind of echoes what we're talking about with recording, whereas in a recording you might be a great player, or on a resume you might have great credentials. But if you can't showcase that in whatever format you've chosen, whether it's a video recording or your CV or something like that, if you can't showcase who you actually are in a way that I can detect, it's you might as well be the guy that has a high school diploma and that's it. It
Absolutely.
doesn't stand out at all.
Absolutely.
Well, it seemed like a big part was like other people need to look at it, like someone who doesn't know what you've done and what you're trying to tell them needs to look at the piece of paper to see if they get the information out that you want them to see.
And then one thing kind of related to that also that was in the document, the first time I ever wrote a cover letter, I had no idea what I was doing. And
Me either.
when I and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but when I showed it to someone, they were like, okay, if I'm on this job committee and I'm looking at you, I have no idea why I should hire you for my job because you haven't told me that you've done any of the things that I'm looking for. So it's always good to have, I think, like a form cover letter, but you definitely have to adapt it and say, oh, I've taught drumline because that's someone that they're looking for, that they're looking for someone that teaches drumline or something like that, and really honing in on the specifics of what they want to draw interest to yourself.
Well, I mean, I think it lets the committee know that you've done the homework. To actually know a little bit more about what the job entails.
Yeah.
If you use the same cover letter for every kind of job, and I think in percussion, this is a bigger deal for us than it is for other instrumentalists. I mean, you really have to rewrite that letter for every single job you apply for.
Yeah.
In the same way that for letters that I write, recommendation letters, they're different for every single student for every single job that they apply for, because committees can smell out when you've just kind of phoned it in.
Yeah.
They can smell that out, and I would much rather have my letter carry much more weight because they know I've done the homework and they know that the student has done the homework. You know.
Yeah. And there are certain portions, obviously, that you have to change less, but
Of course.
for sure, yeah, you have to have those sections you go into detail on.
I really like that you said you should practice talking aloud for this job, for the JMU job, and I've just learned, and it's so evident from reading what you wrote, that you can prepare for interviews. Sounds so stupid now, but I didn't know that before. Years ago, it's like, yes, you should, and are expected to prepare for these interviews. I knew, okay, I got to play recital. Great, I know how to prepare for that. But I didn't know how to prepare for an interview, or that was even really an option. So anyway, I would have Laurel ask me questions while we were cooking or something, and I would just practice saying it or say it on the drive, just so that, like you said, it rolls off smoothly and naturally.
I mean, you don't want it to come off like if you've been watching the presidential debates, like, you want it to come off to be organic. You don't want it to be like scripted. Of course you're going to be asked about recruiting. Of course you're going to be asked about your areas of special research and all these other kinds of things in an interview. But that doesn't mean you have to have like a rehearsed. It's so rehearsed that it sounds cold.
Yeah, but to just have it come out of your mouth once,
Yeah. And that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons I always have an interview appendix with me, is that you can always just hand that out to everybody on the committee. They can open it up, and when you say, okay, for my recruiting strategy, let's all refer to page 8, and then you can see everything that we're talking about, and you can kind of go point by point rather than having to just verbalize everything.
There is a book a friend of ours recommended called On Staff. Have you heard of this book?
I have not. No.
Okay, let me make sure that is
correct.
Find it. I gotta make sure that's what it was called.
It's a fantastic book. It just talks about going through an interview process as someone who wants to work in a music department.
No way.
It's specifically about a music department, and
I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah, it's called,
here it is. On Staff by Donald Hammond.
Hammond.
Yeah, Donald Hammond. On Staff, a practical guide to starting your career in a university.
Oh, it's like a higher ed. It's a high. Oh no, check that out.
Yeah, so it's here. I'll send you guys a quick link if you wanna. If you just want to
looking.
see what I'm talking about.
I've never heard of that.
We didn't buy it. I didn't have enough time to think, yeah, I can buy this and like actually digest it. Oh shoot, we lost John, but hopefully he comes back in. I didn't have time to like say, oh yeah, I can totally soak all this in. But what we did do is we looked up in the index. They had chapters just on Amazon, and we practiced the questions they listed. So they talked about just questions you're likely to be asked, and it's so great because it was separated like department chair stuff from dean stuff. Which was just great because I just had no idea. Like I've not been through any interview type of training or preparation other than the other interviews that I had failed.
Also, I have a question related to this. Someone wrote an article for PAS recently. It might have actually been John Parks on the auditions. Have you guys seen that article?
No.
Someone surveyed a bunch of people and asked basically what they played for the auditions, and I know John was consulted for it at least. And I know Tom Burt was on it, Svet Stoyanov was on it, a few others. I can't remember, several others.
J.B. Smith did that.
Yeah. Okay. So I was wondering, like, what I know in John's document he talks about it. Also, he did 30 minutes of like regular recital and a 30-minute like mock audition. Casey, what did you do for yours at JMU?
At JMU, I had the standard meetings, chair, dean. I had a real casual meet and greet the faculty. It wasn't Q&A, but I did have Q.
Specifically on the recital, though.
Oh, what did I do? Let's see. I played snare drum solo, multi-solo, timpani solo. Let's see. Two marimba solos, and then a handful of excerpts.
Was that an hour?
And I played Temescal.
Gotcha.
Was that an hour? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, somewhere close to an hour.
One thing I was wondering for you in particular, Casey, is JMU has all these Malatech marimbas, which if you've never played on a Malatech marimba, or even if you haven't played on one recently, is like, it's a very different experience from playing on a Majestic or Adams or whatever. Did you play your recital on a Malatech?
I told the chair, I said, "Get me a damn Majestic." No. You know what? That question is a really good example of what I think. Like, you'll get the job or the position or whatever when you're like truly ready. So I've been playing enough clinicking and concerting around that I'm just so used to that problem. It's like, oh, a foreign marimba that I'm not used to. Okay, let's just try to like get your eyeballs used to the bar geometry a little better, and off you go. And it felt at home. Yeah. Because I've just done that enough. So no, I played on one of their Malatechs. It sounded great, no problems. And it's interesting. It's so hard, I think, to prepare for that kind of stuff. And of course you can, and you should try your very, very best to compensate for all the challenges that will likely come. But I had 2 real in-person interviews that I failed before getting this one, and the first one was Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I hope it's not tacky to say what this is.
John says it's okay.
He says it's okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, I think I had just been adjunct at Concord for just 1 or 2 years, and that interview I played great, no problem, but had no idea how to talk to the dean, had no idea how to talk to the chair, didn't even really know what the dean and chair do exactly. So, of course, I'm asking the dean like the wrong kind of questions, like, so like, I don't know, how do I get money for drum heads, or something, I don't know. I was doing stuff that you're not supposed to do, so it's no wonder I didn't get that
Casey,
job.
Go back and watch this episode and watch John Park's face when you say that.
I see it. I see it, Ben.
But the second you said it, it was just like...
Yeah, he threw up. Yeah, he threw up a little bit. Hey, Ben, check it out. Go back.
Okay.
Hey, Ben, go back and watch this episode later. And check that out a little bit.
Right.
Okay, so then the second real job interview I had, I thought went great, and that's because I had the time working at a university, and by then I had been on a committee, I had been on search committees, and I got to know my dean very well. Actually, by then we had like 3 different deans at that university, so I got to know several different deans. I got to really learn what they do. I became really great friends with my department chair, and I really like absorbed what all those people do, and I happened to not get that job either, but I had a great interview all around. Like, everything felt really, really, really good. So I don't know. It's like I want to tell people you want to prepare for the process as much as possible, but you also need to actually be ready for what you're supposed to know. Like, not just, I'm not sure how to say this. Don't try to play the system too much. Just like try to be there. Try to like actually be at the level that you want to be at.
It's also a good idea. I mean, there are a bunch of things in that paper that outline, say, what you're going to be asked or what you're going to need to be able to talk about. But one of the things that I would do is I would come up with the craziest questions from students or from anybody else that I could possibly think of, as if they were curveballs, things that I'm probably not going to hear, but I might, and if I did, what would I do? So I just came up with the craziest things ever. Like, I would pretend that I was coaching a student who wouldn't pay attention to anything that I wanted to tell them in the actual audition, and this happens sometimes. You show up, you've got these 3 students that that you have to work with. Maybe they don't know who you are, or they're mad because their teacher is leaving, or they feel like their teacher was it and you're an idiot. And you come in and you say, hey, little Johnny, I'd like to hear you play some snare drum, and they play, and then you say, okay, let's try this. No, I'm not trying anything, because my teacher said that this is fun.
I'm calling your mom.
And it's like, but this happens in front of like everybody. How are you supposed to handle that? I mean, do you sit there and go, well, do you smack them in the face? Do you try and choke them and say, listen to me, boy? I mean, those are things that you clearly can't do, so you've got to find a way to salvage the situation. And one of the things that I did with a kid once was he was talking about something, he played some Tchaikovsky for me, and I said, okay, you know, why don't you try this? And he was like, well, I don't think I need to try that because I've been playing this for such and such, and they seem to think that it's fine. And I said, well, let's just change the environment. Instead of me being, you know, a teacher and you being a student, let's pretend that you're an untenured member of an orchestra and I'm the principal. And now I'm going to ask you to do something, and I'm not really asking you, I'm telling you. It's not democracy, it's a dictatorship, it's just cleverly disguised. But I said it really nicely. I was like, you know, okay, let's pretend, you know, you're in my section and you're not tenured, and I'm going to ask you to do something. Can you do it? And then he still gave me some mouth about it, and I said, okay, let's change the dynamic again. Now I'm the music director, and you're a non-tenured member of the orchestra, and when I ask you to do this, if you can't do it, you're probably not going to get tenure, and you're probably not going to stay with the orchestra. So let's frame it that way and just see if you can do it. I'm not saying that what you did was wrong. I'm just saying that I'd like to see you try it a few different ways just so you can always approach the situation with as many arrows in your quiver as possible. And the kid totally changed right there.
Wow.
He was like, wow, oh, so this is how orchestras work. And I was like, absolutely it is. So let's try this. And he did it, and everything was fine. But it easily could have gone south, because I'm not the kind of person that likes a lot of mouth from people. You know, if I'm asking you to do something, I'm typically not going to handle it very well if you insult me or tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about or something like that. And so this particular situation, it could have been really, really ugly, but it turns out that it was really kind of nice, and that student ended up doing really, really well down the road. So.
That's cool. I took a Steve Lates' theory pedagogy class at Eastman.
Oh yeah.
And he, when you do your just like practice teaching assignments, you pass around an envelope with different student characteristics in them. So, you know, one kid like is really shy, one kid like actually cries, or someone asks a million questions, or someone is super, super negative, or someone just can't get specific concept. I thought that was a cool way. You know, it ended up being hilarious in a lot of situations, but it did. You know, really, you had to get through it. No matter what, somehow you had to get through it. And in some cases, you know, your colleagues were relentless. But it was a really good lesson.
It's good practice, you know, because that stuff does happen. It's not always easy. You know, and I'm sure we've all had the good situations, but the bad ones happen too.
Yeah. Totally.
Go ahead, Laurel. You want to do something?
Well, if there's a law.
Yeah. Let's do some segments.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Really quick, just on what you were talking about, Megan and John. I used to have to teach a music appreciation class, and non-majors are wonderful at being jackasses, and you have to teach through it.
Come on.
They can be.
Some of them are really great, but sometimes they're awful, and you have to keep teaching, and it's terrible. But anyway, those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a little bit know that one of the books I was reading is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And have you read this book, John?
I have, yes.
Yeah, you seems like you've read this book.
Yeah.
He is highly.
He's very effective.
He is highly effective.
I don't know about that.
To the question, he did know the answer.
What is this Stravinsky thing coming from? What is the problem with Ben?
Oh, gee.
I know exactly. What is the problem with Ben? You said it just right.
The problem is that I did one week. I did a segment on it, and Casey, after I specifically said on the episode that Stravinsky never used the L, as stated by Bill Kraft in Percussive Notes, Casey goes online and posts this episode with the L, and I was so upset.
So then we had a long Facebook
debate
about whether the L should be there or not.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. That's
beautiful.
beautiful.
But yeah, who knows? We'll probably kick Ben from the podcast soon enough. Anyway, Laurel, please.
No, but so this will probably be my last time talking about this book, simply because I think it's time to move on. But the part I'm at now, in terms of becoming a highly effective person, is about public victories and taking all of these discoveries of, you know, how to align yourself with your own values and your character and integrity, and to take that outside. So in a way, this really fits with, trying to get a job, and how do you present yourself on paper, how do you do it in a recording. It all kind of really meshes together. But this particular chapter is called Think Win-Win, and trying to make situations, positive outcomes for everyone involved, which I think, John, you touched on, talking about the audition process and no pre-screenings because you want everyone to have an experience. And so much of the world functions in a win-lose type situation, which is what competition does. Someone has to win, and then everybody else has to lose. And it's very easy to think that that's the only way that it has to be, but It's not. And the author, Stephen Covey, gives a really clear example of a win-win situation when he talks about when his daughter was old enough to drive and had her license and wanted to drive the family car around to school and her various outings with friends. And instead of deciding to give her all these rules and constantly checking on it, he and his wife decided that she can do that as long as she's willing to sometimes drive them around, willing to clean the inside of the car, to wash it, maybe every other week, and to, of course, obey her curfew. She can drive the car, and that's a win-win for everybody because then the parents don't have to clean the car, nor do they have to babysit her, and the daughter gets to drive.
So you have a mentality of just, what does everyone get out of this that's good?
Yeah, what does everybody get that's good? And something that really relates to how do you figure out how to make a situation positive for everyone, a win-win, involves these kind of two polarizing mentalities, which to me were the most interesting part of this chapter, and that's a scarcity mentality and an abundance mentality. And scarcity says there's not enough to go around for everyone, whatever it may be, whether it's jobs, salaries, houses, cars, something. Abundance says there's more than enough for everyone, and everyone has a place. Scarcity says something good happening for somebody else is bad for me.
Right.
But abundance says good for you is good for me because it means it works. And people who align themselves with a scarcity mentality have a really hard time being happy for those that experience success, whereas abundance, it's just happy for everybody all the time because it means that we're all becoming, who we're supposed to be. And I mean, we could just start conversation right here, but it seems to me, John, from hearing you speak, that you're more of an abundance mentality kind of person.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, my wife is standing right beside me.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I was going to get her to look over here, but she said no, she didn't want to be seen.
Aww.
I'm sorry.
Did you tell her that Megan's here?
I did. She knows.
Say hi.
She knows.
It is kind of a big deal at Percussion. I understand if she's kind of like, whoa, this is like huge.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Laura. Go ahead and ask me.
Yeah. So I would just be interested in do you consider yourself more of an abundance mentality person or a scarcity mentality? I have a guess just from being
abundance, 100%, and this is why. Oh, hey.
That's awesome. Happy to hear.
Come say hi.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Hi. Look who's here.
Yay!
Do you remember Aunt Megan?
Hi, Aunt Megan.
Okay, so abundance for sure. The thing is, I try and model almost everything that I do off of outcomes, like what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be best for my program, what's going to be best for my students. But I think the difference between me and other people is that I'm not concerned at all about myself, really. Guys, put on your clothes and get out of here. Even get these boys out of here.
He was so nice. He was so nice until the clothes came.
Sorry, this is what happens,
If I had $1 for every time I had to say that to this
But I think at every opportunity, I'm trying to make sure that the students are successful. And that success means a lot of different things. It can mean getting a job. It can mean getting into a great school. It can be a great recital. It could be just a great lesson. Or sometimes, as I'm sure all of you know, I mean, you're kind of the psychologist of your studio too. And sometimes, students come in and they need to talk to you about things that may not have anything to do with music, and trying to come up with outcomes that put them first. And the fact that I have no care or concern about how I'm perceived anymore. All that really matters is how the students are perceived. So the success of my program is not based upon what John does. The success of my program is based upon what my students do. And when you start to look at it that way, everything becomes abundance. You know, there really are no losers. Everyone's a winner that way. So there's so much negativity and there's so much, one-upsmanship in our world with percussion, and there's so many jerks out there. It's just hard sometimes to keep that in mind. And so what I just try and do is at all times, anything that I touch, I'm going to try and make it better. And if that's a student outcome or if that's a recording or if that's any other kind of thing, I'm just going to try and put that first and put myself second. And granted, you guys can't really do that yet because you've got to get tenure and you've got to get promoted. So a lot of what you do is about what you do. You know, Casey and Megan and Ben, you guys are going to, Laurel, all of you are going to have to get out and play concerts. You need to do days of percussion. You need to do international festivals. You need to play at PASIC. You need to do all of that stuff. For me, at this point in my career, I don't need to do any of that stuff anymore. In fact, if I'd never played another concert in my entire life, it would be okay. Because I know that I can still get my students where they need to be, and I've done it. You know, I've already done everything that I wanted to do. There's not that much more that I really need to, and I think that's one of the reasons that recording has become such a passion. It's like a new area to focus on a student-centric level. You know, it's kind of cool to do that way. So if that answers your questions, I'm definitely an abundance person. I'm not scarcity.
Well, you know, speaking of students, and I know we're taking a really long time here, but I think it's great stuff, and it's just worth the longer episode. I'll paraphrase Carlos Johnson's question. He asked via Facebook regarding percussion curriculums. Some of them are still dated all the way back to 50 years ago. He wants to know how you prepare students with curriculum, considering the new job market and also considering the business side of it, and it looks like also considering the technological side of it, which it sounds like you're doing with recording. But what else in addition to recording?
Well, if maybe we can just take it like one point at a time, and he's talking about curriculum. I think the real trick for all of us is that, especially when you're at a school that's not a conservatory, because all of us teach at kind of generalist kinds of schools. Would we agree?
Yeah.
So your job is really to prepare students, you know, bread and butter, and then also to prepare them maybe towards one area of specialty that they might really like, where they would really excel, and then help them choose a graduate program that's going to help them with both of those things, right? And help them move on down the line into doing what that they want to do. So you have to find a good mix of the old school and the new school in order to make sure that the students know exactly what's going on. And so they're playing the contemporary literature, you know, they're playing Burritt Variations, or they're playing Casey's new piece, or they're playing these things because they know that it's out there, but they're also playing Bach and Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and all these other things that they need to be able to play. So the real trick in doing that, Casey, I think, is going to PASIC. You know, if you go to PASIC and you see all the great players and you look and listen at what they're playing and how they're playing it, I mean, I think that changes everything down the line. It's kind of like going to Olympus. You know, you go to Olympus and you see what all the gods are playing and how they're playing it and what they do, and that stuff trickles down into the next levels. So I think the trick for what Carlos is asking about, yeah, it would be really easy for you to say, all right, I'm only going to play, or I'm only going to teach Mitch Peters, and I'm only going to teach Goodman, and I'm only going to teach, you know, method of movement, and I'm only going to do that stuff, and I'm not going to look towards any of this other stuff. I think that's old school and kind of irresponsible. I think you have to find a way of making sure that everyone is up to date, and your students are playing the up-to-date literature, but they still have to know where that came from. So I guess the way that I keep the curriculum fresh is I have the student, man, they're on the internet all the time. I'm sure your students are like this too. Like, they find pieces that I haven't heard of yet. Yeah. And they'll bring, and especially with new graduate students, they bring in music that I don't know. that maybe they heard when they were an undergrad, or maybe they heard at a day of percussion, and they bring in a lot of stuff that I don't know, which I'm totally into, as long as we make sure that we've got a good balance of everything else, so that when they represent themselves through a recital or an audition, that they're showing that they're really capable of doing things from all the different time periods. So I think that's probably the easiest way to stay up, is just go to PASIC. That's why I like to go. That and seeing all my friends, but really it's just go see what people are playing and how they're playing it. And then, some of it's crap, of course. Probably more than just some of it is total crap. But there's a lot of other stuff that when you throw it at the wall, it sticks, and that can be stuff that people are playing for the next decade. I mean, look at Vinyao. Look at Vinyau's music. I mean, who would have known that any of this was going to be a big deal at all, except for the first time you heard somebody play Con Variations, and then you realized, oh my God, this piece is unbelievable. And the more you dig into it, the more three-dimensional it becomes. I mean, where are you going to see that if you don't go to PASIC? You won't.
It's my favorite thing about going clinicking, concerting, and things, is just to hear what other people are doing and what they have to say, and listen to other people's clinics. It just keeps you so, I don't know, in the know.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't know anything about you except for the first time that you played a showcase concert. And that's what really got me into looking at your videos and doing other. And of course, the students already knew who you were, because they pay attention to this stuff even more than I do. So that's how I got into all of your pieces and how I knew all of them. So it was all from PASIC first.
Yeah, go PASIC. Yeah, we had our Thanks PASIC. Just a bit ago, and it's just, I can't say it enough, and I say it so much to my own. It's like, go to PASIC, must go to PASIC. So, well, how about Ben? Would you like to try to squeeze your segment in?
Yeah, sure. So I want to start my segment out with a question, John. If you saw these on a program, which of these would you say?
Now that is funny. I'm gonna stick with the little L, the French title there at the beginning.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go with the first one.
Correct again. Exactly.
That is beautiful.
I've always seen the second one written on programs.
Dr. Ben. Yeah.
That is beautiful.
So anyway, that's my segment today.
So are you guys playing it, or are you just talking about the piece?
So I always try to talk about some sort of maybe historical person, piece, subject, something along those lines. So today I wanted to talk a bit about David Maslanka's Crown of Thorns, because this semester Megan and I both did Crown of Thorns on our percussion ensemble concerts, and it's obviously kind of one of the staples in the repertoire. So I'd like to just share a little bit about this piece. The University of Oklahoma Percussion Ensemble, kind of in the mid-'80s, under the direction of Richard Gibson, came up with this idea that Gibson called like the percussion orchestra. The idea being that you could sort of create the multi-timbral violin or string, wind, brass type of sound, all with percussion instruments. So Gibson commissioned quite a few pieces for this sort of percussion orchestra instrumentation, starting with the Raymond Habel Diabolic Variations in 1985 that's the first one that I know of, and then 1987 Dan Welcher's Chameleon Music, 1991 was Crown of Thorns, and kind of the other really big one that people might be familiar with is Erica Wazen's Palace of Nine Perfections in 1999. So Crown of Thorns in particular is scored for 4 marimbas, 2 vibraphones, and 1 glockenspiel. It's been heavily recorded on several different albums by universities. I found a University of Utah recording, Texas A&M Commerce recording, University of Oklahoma, who also has a great YouTube recording of it. It's one of the Vic Firth videos with kind of a high production value on it. Lawrence University and Central Michigan University all have CD recordings of this piece. And when I was looking into this piece on David Maslanka's website, I found actually, I knew he had written quite a bit for percussion, but I honestly didn't even know the extent of all of his percussion-focused works. So in total, David Maslanka has written actually 15 pieces for percussionists, 6 pieces for percussion ensemble, 5 of which are this sort of percussion orchestra we're talking about. But then he also has a piece called Time Stream from 2012 for steel drum ensemble, which I had no idea. And he has the score, the perusal score on his website. There's no audio, but it's a piece that when I looked through the score, I was like, oh, I'd really like to hear this.
Yeah, I asked him about that. We played Crown of Thorns because he was a composer in residence, and I asked him, and he said that it hasn't been recorded at all yet. I guess it was commissioned, but nobody's recorded it. So. Has
it been played? Like, has it been premiered?
I don't know if it's been played either, and I want to say no.
Huh. Yeah, and then he has 2 solo marimba pieces, My Lady White and Variations on Lost Love, the latter of which was written for Lee Stevens. That those are fairly well known. They're not all that often performed because they're so difficult, but they are, pretty popular in the canon. He has 4 chamber pieces that feature percussion somewhat heavily. One of which I'm very interested in performing sometime. It's a long title, but the first few words of it are "This is the world we know," and it's for 2 pianos, 2 percussion. It was written in 2009, and it's like 50 minutes long. So that piece alone is almost a concert in and of itself. And then he has 3 concerti, 2 for marimba and 1 for percussion, with varying instrumentations of band or I think 2 are for wind ensemble and 1 is for like a chamber orchestra. But anyway, we're here today to talk about Crown of Thorns. I actually had the privilege when I was studying at University of Miami of working with David Maslanka on this piece. I had a group of students from Miami that played it, and I got to conduct it for David Maslanka. And so that was a very cool experience to get to hear him talk about the piece. And for anyone not in the know, David Maslanka is a very kind of profound person that he's the type that would have pieces come to him in dreams.
Did he ask you if there's a Viking ship close by?
No. But so this piece in particular, he talked about he had this dream or vision of Jesus getting out of a pink Cadillac and taking his like crown of thorns and kind of casually tossing it off to the side, and that was, I guess, his kind of impetus for composing this piece. It's in like an expanded sonata form with 3 themes instead of the regular 2. It has a lot of interlocking rhythmic passages that are very difficult, and I would say are on the verge of being almost unplayable with how fast they are. They're certainly doable, but it's definitely on the edge of a lot of people's technique to pull these things off. And so, for example, there's one part, it's measure 107 in the piece, if you're keeping score at home, where one person is playing, we'll put an image of this on the screen so you can see, but one person is playing 8th note and then 4 32nd notes, repeatedly that rhythm, and then another person is playing the opposite of that rhythm, so it's a stream of 32nd notes if you're just listening to it afar. And that part is also it starts out, I think, in 11/8, and then it goes through several meter changes. It's incredibly difficult, and then there's also a melody with quarter note triplets that like flow over the bar line going on top of that. So it's a really interesting piece, and it's pretty simple in its instrumentation with just vibraphone, marimba, and glockenspiel, but the treatment of it is just exquisite, and there's a lot of detail inside the notes. So that's as short as I can make it, really. David Maslanka's Crown of Thorns.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. You guys, I have never played this piece.
It's great. It's one of my first. Actually, Ben, something to add to what you said, which I thought was great. I don't know if you guys know Wes Parker at all. He teaches at Harding University in Arkansas. He did his treatise on the percussion ensemble and the percussion orchestra, and strictly what the percussion orchestra came from and how it developed over time from Richard Gibson onward, and through Richard Gibson's students, Brian West, and a whole bunch of others that have kind of carried the torch for him in that way. It might be interesting reading for anybody who's paying attention to this kind of stuff.
And then for me, one thing that I enjoyed about this piece is I actually, during my doctorate, studied conducting as well. I studied with Gary Green. Mm-hmm. And it's a piece that it's one of the few pieces I can think of that are actually very, very challenging for the conductor as well as the ensemble, as far as you need to be able to do, fermatas and ritardandos and things very, very effectively.
Plus, that 11/8 section is tough for everybody.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to get everybody just to do it and not to pay any attention to you whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then eventually you catch it all back at that C major section at the end of it, and it's like,
there's a 9/8 bar, and you just wait for that
right,
final
just
one,
wait for it, and then everybody's there.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, I don't want to go into any detail about this piece, but also, are any of you guys familiar with the David Maslanka piece, Honer?
Oh yeah, we've done it 3 times.
Yeah, that is like Crown of Thorns is an epic undertaking, but Honer is like another step beyond that. It's for, I think, 9 marimbas, and I know there's 2 sets of timpani, I think 4 vibraphones. I mean, it's just like, it's
you can
basically
break it down though.
double Crown of Thorns.
We did it with 5 marimbas, with 2 people doubling the first one, 2 vibraphones, the 2 sets of timpani, and everything else. But we didn't triple all of the instruments the way that, because that was written for Central Michigan back when Honer was there. Well, actually, Honer passed away. Right, and you don't need that many people playing it. I mean, you can make it kind of the wind ensemble version by cutting down all of those triplet.
It's pretty rare that you could even find. I think it's for 21 players as he intended it. I mean, 21 players is basically an entire percussion studio, and to find a really capable percussion studio of that many people is it's almost impossible at most universities to put that piece on. And I know I was lucky when I was an undergrad at North Texas, which is huge. That was one of the few places I felt that could really get 21 graduate students on stage performing that piece. And even for them, they had to have a few kind of undergrad people, playing it. But yeah, that's a rare piece to hear performed.
Megan, you played it with us.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time we did it. You were playing vibraphone, as I remember.
Was I? I don't even remember what I played.
Yep.
Wow.
Hey, speaking of 21 graduate students, this question is just kind of for everyone, since we talk so much about jobs and auditioning and pre-screening and those sorts of things. How do you feel about the health of available jobs at large out there?
You talking to me?
I guess anyone. Like there's, we talk about all the time, like some programs will have lots of DMA students, or they'll take 21 master students.
Yeah.
And I know we talk about it all the time. Like would be great to have 21 master students, but there's so few. Something's got to be said about the available jobs that are out there, and I think we all know this. But how do you guys feel?
I don't think it's nearly as big a problem as people will tell you that it is. I think more old school people will say, oh, there aren't that many jobs. It's irresponsible for you to be a musician or to be a music major. I mean, my first master class at Northwestern was Al Payson coming in, and I love him, but he came into a class and he wrote 5 on the board, and he said that's how many jobs there are. Period. That was the master class, And I just remember thinking, that's not true. There are tons of things that people can do. So instead of thinking, well, I mean, if you only think about orchestras or college teaching, yes, there are not that many jobs open. We're really fortunate these last couple of years. There are a lot of jobs open, both last year and this year, which is great. And of course, that some years we won't have any open at all. But I figure instead of training someone just to win a university position or just to win an orchestra position, train them instead to be an entrepreneur that can take care of themselves, and they can. If you think of having a job like a Ross Perot pie chart, instead of 100% of it being orchestra or 100% of it being teaching, you can have percentages of those things. Like you can do like Ben's doing. You can teach in an adjunct position, but you treat it like a full-time tenure track position, and you grow it just the same. Then on the other side, you've got maybe some high school students that you teach, probably, Ben. I'm just giving you as an example. And then beyond that, you've got the playing that you do, both as a chamber musician and coming from Miami and Sabbatical program. I imagine that's very important to you.
Yeah.
And then you also get to sub maybe in some local orchestras, or you get called to play some church gigs, or you get called to do some other stuff. And if you're really into technology, you might have some recording work too that you can do, like high school choir or band or whatever else. You can go out and make recordings for people. So that pie chart, not any one thing is the thing. that shifts, every week. Maybe next week it's a little bit different. But the fact is that it's 100% music. Everything that you're doing is music.
Yeah, that's actually exactly how I've explained it to people before. Is it's like, I remember my last retail job. I sold appliances at Sears one summer when I was finishing up my master's degree, and ever since then, all the money I've made has been from music or music-related things, just like you're talking about. So. Yeah.
So and there's and Ben, I haven't talked for a long time, so I don't know what your aspirations are, but if you eventually want to have a full-time college job, you'll do that, and what you find is that you still have the same pie chart. It's just divvied up differently.
Yeah.
You've got the teaching that you have to do. You've got the guidance you have to give. You've got seminars you have to teach. There's ensembles you have to prepare for. There are all these other things that you're not even talking about playing yet. So I think really instead of thinking of, I don't need 100 graduate students. 4 is enough. That's really all I need. That's enough for FSU, for them to teach the undergrads that I need them to teach and do everything that I need them to do. We easily could have 60 percussion majors at Florida State, but I don't do it, and I keep it down at 20 or 24 on purpose because, A, I think it's irresponsible to put out more than that turns out in a given time, because there aren't that many positions, but also because I want to make sure I have enough time with all of them to teach them to be functioning members of society that don't have to have a college gig or an orchestra gig in order to survive. They can go out there and they don't have to do anything that they don't want to do. They can just teach and play and come up with combinations that work for them. And then all they got to do is figure out the longevity of it and how they're going to deal with like health insurance and those kinds of things, which obviously having a job takes care of. But other than that, I think just trying to train entrepreneurs is probably the most important part. Yes, I want them to be able to play porgy like Jake Nisley, and yes, I want them to have a soft snare drum roll like Will James, and yes, I want them to be able to play white knuckle stroll like Casey, and I want them to be able to do all these things. But at the end of the day, I want them to be able to take care of themselves and contribute to society, and not worry so much about hanging their hat on a quote-unquote job.
It's great to hear positive words about it, because man, so many people are just so down about it. Like I will post a job opening on Facebook for friends, say like, hey, percussionist, go get them or something, and there's one person says, wow, thanks so much, I hadn't seen this one, and then the next person says, this is ridiculous, it's a instructor position, no benefits, and they want to
what? That's great.
It's
that's great. That person's not going to apply because people like that aren't ever going to get anywhere. And it's nice, the fact that they put that out in public, and so later on when one of your students gets the job or whatever else, and you can write in all caps like I do on Facebook when my students do something, and you can tell that kid, that's one of the most important things for people that are listening. You're not up against every single music major at every single program in the country. Like 70% of them are assholes. They're never going to get anywhere. And if they do, they'll go and play somewhere and people won't want them to be there anymore. It's always going to go to the people that are easy to get along with and who are consistently very excellent musical players. That's all you got to do.
Well, that's how I worded it to someone recently, literally 2 weeks ago. I think there's enough jobs out there for the people who are working hard and working the right way. I don't think there are enough jobs out there for everyone, and that's the 70% of assholes that aren't eligible. But there are enough jobs out there for the eligible people, which are the ones who are like doing it right.
Also, people, I will say, people do get cranky about seeing, like that, instructor position with no benefits, and they want someone with a DMA for it. And it's like, okay, in a perfect world, that job would carry, benefits or would be tenure track or whatever. But the reality of it is that it's not, and you have to start somewhere. And I know I used to read really, really old PAS articles, and I remember seeing an interview that Shi Wu did with someone, and in her bio it said Shi Wu is like the professor at, I can't even remember the name. It was like some no-name school in West Virginia, or Lee Howard Stevens taught at Nazareth College, or some school I've never heard of, and these are the people that we respect so much today. And it's like, Shi Wu didn't get the job at Northwestern as her first job. It was several jobs down the road. So there's starting jobs that you have to treat, as the best thing in the world until something else good comes along.
Well, and I think that's what I was saying with you have to actually be prepared, and getting to step 3, part of that is having gone through step 1 and 2. If you try to just skip straight to step 3, and you're like, oh, I have my DMA. Where's my office and my secretary?
Why
what the
is my
hell?
phone ringing?
Yeah. Well, hey, let's try to knock out these last 2 Facebook questions just real quick. I think we've covered a lot of this in a lot of words, so I think we can do it quick. Will Marinelli just wants to know, how has recording changed the way you play percussion?
Oh.
Real quick.
I don't think
Real quick,
anything has made me more obsessive about my sound and my timekeeping on every instrument. Because, man, you can do all the listening while you're playing that you want, but until you hear it in context, you really have no idea what it sounds like more than 10 feet away. And I think that, just knowing what something is really supposed to sound like and how it fits in with a chamber group or an ensemble, or even, just as a soloist, what your left hand and your right hand are doing, I think that has made me completely obsessive.
Yeah, wonderful. One more from Brian Blume. Our friend Brian Blume wants to know, from your perspective, what sets apart the best and most successful students from those who struggle to make a career in percussion or music?
Attitude and consistency.
Cool, and answered that quickly.
Yeah, seriously. You guys, if you haven't already figured it out, because you're all young compared to me, but what happens is, people want to play with people that they like. People want to work with people that they like. They don't want to work or play with people that they don't like. So be someone that people like.
It's the students you liked having around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, hey, John, thanks so much for joining us in a great episode, and thanks for all your kind words, and it's always fun talking with you, and I wish we could catch up more. We'll have to have you back on sometime.
Oh, anytime. Thank you guys for having me, and I trust that you'll edit out all this stuff where I sound like an idiot.
I think there's just a few for me to edit out, but yeah.
Thanks so much. It's been great to see all of you, especially since I haven't seen you all in person in a while, except for Casey.
Yeah.
So, it's great to see you all, and thanks for having me. Anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great stuff.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Get those kids,
guys.
Get those kids in some clothes.
Yeah. Mark your words. Mark your words.
Hey, thanks, you guys. Take it easy. We'll catch you.
Take it easy, guys.
Bye.